This is On the Flywheel, a podcast where each week we talk to entrepreneurs and professionals about the practical things they do to build and keep momentum in their personal and professional lives. Hello and welcome to On the Flywheel. I am your host, Jonathan Mart of Flywheel Consulting, and today I'm very excited to have on Russ Powell of Russ Powell Consulting. Thanks for being on today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
So we're going to jump right into it. The first question I always ask everyone, and like we talked about before, I'm excited for your answer because I think you have a very interesting career history. I'd love to hear a little bit about your career journey and how you got to being a consultant today, and a little bit what you do now.
How much time?
Yeah, we have like 40 minutes.
I'll give you the overview. So, let's see. I grew up in the Southeast in Atlanta and went to school in New Orleans. I have a couple of degrees, one in psychology from Loyola, good Jesuit school, New Orleans, right? And then one from Georgia State, a degree in counseling.
Loyola is a beautiful school, by the way.
In New Orleans, have you been?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, I've walked a little bit around the campus.
Yeah,
but
yeah. So anyway, I grew up in a very religious family, and right out of graduate school, I had been recruited by the Jesuits, and so I spent a year with the Jesuits. It didn't take me but like a few months to decide I didn't want to be a priest. but leaving that, I ended up teaching. Well, as a part of my graduate studies, I was teaching at Georgia State. The Jesuits are known as a teaching order, and so there's one of the big things I liked about them. Also some social justice issues that they deal with and whatnot. But when I left the Jesuits, I got back into teaching as a part of my I had done some teaching in my internship. I got back into that and decided that I was teaching at Georgia State and decided I really wanted to be in business, and got into instructional design. It's if you've ever been to a good training program, a good training program, there's always, not the crappy ones, but there's always somebody behind the scenes who's designing that course, trying to figure out, what are we going to teach and how are we going to teach it? What games are we going to play? How are we going to people test their understanding? And so I got into that, and that's what I did for most of my career. I did early on, right after my graduate studies, get into leadership and team development, which I'm doing today. But I think I was too young. I think people just like, this guy, what does he have to offer, right?
Yeah, I gotta imagine it's tough to want to learn leadership and stuff from someone that's never led anything, really,
Exactly. But that was part of my kind of early decision making, where I ended up deciding to get into instructional design, and I love that work. I moved to California in '97 and was doing some of that work with a guy named Chris Holmberg. He's a mentor of mine who I work with a lot today. And I'm thinking, let's see. So my instructional design work brought me to working with the U.S. Coast Guard. I spent several years running the instructional systems design team for the Coast Guard base or one of the teams in Petaluma. So
okay.
People don't know this, but it's the largest West Coast training center in the U.S. Yeah. And so I got some chops there. My mentor, Chris Holmberg, and I, with some others, built the first state-of-the-art corporate university for Nelson staffing, or Nelson Connects now. I know you know some people there. So it was like late 90s when we were doing that. And Chris and I kept in touch after that work, while I was doing instructional systems design work, not just for the Coast Guard, but working with Sun Microsystems, which is now part of Oracle, and Roche and Genentech, and those guys. Anyway, I just got tired of that after maybe 25 years, and then just shifted back into leadership and team development about 5 years ago.
Were you, just a quick question, were you working for these companies as like a standard W-2 employee, or were you doing some sort of kind of
No, I was working as a part of a consulting organization. Okay. So like for the Coast Guard, I was working with, they tend to run through companies, Titan, L3, there was another one, I can't remember.
Okay, so you were employed by a consulting company, then advising these other companies.
Exactly. And then when I was working with Sun Microsystems, I was an employee, a W-2 employee. But then for a while, I was running a company called Peregrine Performance Group with a buddy of mine, and we had clients like SAP and Roche and Genentech and those guys. So that, again, we were a consulting firm, my own consulting firm, but working for these clients.
Interesting. So that brings us to Russ Powell Consulting today.
Yes.
So what are you doing today?
Yeah, so today, leadership and team development. And mostly what I do is work with startups, growing startups, who you can imagine they have managers who may have great technical expertise, but they're not universally, but oftentimes they struggle with, let's call it collaborative problem-solving skills, solving problems, working with people, that kind of thing. And that's pretty much what I do. I help them build skills in systems thinking and collaborative problem solving and how to have those difficult conversations we're all avoiding, stuff like that. So,
Yeah, all the hard things, right?
Exactly.
So what inspired you to go out and start your own gig then? How long have you been doing it on your own?
Yeah, for a very long time. Russ Powell Consulting has two iterations. One was doing instructional systems design work. And then I shifted to Peregrine with my business partner, Joe Halpin. And then when Peregrine crashed and burned, it's a long, sad story. We did a lot of great work, but in the end it crashed and burned. I rebooted Russ Powell Consulting doing leadership and team development.
Gotcha. So I'm excited to talk to you about some leadership and team stuff because I think that's so interesting. What are some of the, obviously I don't want you to give up the whole goose here, but just high level, what are some of the common mistakes that you see people making when they're leading teams?
Good question. One of them, and I don't mind giving up the goose. I often feel like I'm working myself out of a job. But one of the things, and it's the first thing, if you come to one of my leadership workshops.
You're giving people a little taste.
Yes.
You're giving them a little hit so they come back for more.
The first thing we address is systems thinking, the ability to think systemically. I think as human beings, we're not very good at thinking systemically, right? You bring me a problem, and I think it's your fault, right? I'm not looking around to see who else could be involved. Or you bring me a problem this afternoon, and I think the cause was this morning, right? And that's just what we tend to do as human beings. But what I do is I offer.
By the way, my wife complains about that all the time. That I'm not really understanding what she's actually upset about.
You're just being human. It's just one of those things we struggle with. So I will talk about my models or my workshops, but that's misleading because virtually everything I work on, or almost everything I work with, comes from my mentor, Chris Holmberg. So like the Leadership in the Middle Path, which is my foundational workshop, Chris designed that. I just have the honor of being able to facilitate it, right? So when I talk about my models, more often than not, I'm talking about models I got from Chris Holmberg. And one of the things I love about his models is they're all very simple, right? No 17-step models to having a better conversation, right?
Right.
Did I remember step 13? No. So like for systems thinking, we have this really simple model called the it, the we, and the I. You and I have talked about this where the it represents structural things, roles, goals, processes. The we is all about relationships, and I is for individuals. And so, people don't tend to think systemically. And just having a simple model like that for any given problem, it helps you think more multidimensionally about possible root causes. And the more you're likely to come up with, I call them non-obvious root causes, the more likely you are to solve the problem, well.
Yeah.
So it stays solved, or you don't waste time or money.
So what's the one thing then if someone was to take it, if you were to give someone the one thing they could do in their daily life to just to do a better job in their teams, what would that one thing be? Just the highest impact, the 80-20 rule.
Right. Well, I think that's part of it, is to adopt a habit of thinking systemically. But I stole this from, I can't even remember who it was. This guy, I think it was on the Tim Ferriss podcast, where he talked about, I can't remember his name, but I think of it as bug Russ, where you would look at yourself the same way you would look at a bug on the ground. You're like, oh, wow, why did he go left instead of right?
So you're saying Russ as a bug Russ.
Right,
okay.
Right, or bug Jonathan.
Okay,
right?
bug Jonathan.
So, but the idea being that every day you take a little bit of time to reflect, examine yourself. What did you do? What did you do well? How did you, what did you struggle with? Those kinds of things. And you can use the it, the we, and the I to help you think through that. How did my projects go? How are my relationships going? How am I doing as a person individually? That kind of thing. And you reflect on today, how did bug Russ do? But you also use that model to help think to the future, for tomorrow, you're planning your day.
Okay, so do you think that people should be writing this down in some way? Should this be part of like a journaling habit? Should it be a part of like reflecting on how should people?
My recommendation
go
is to
through the
write
process?
it down. But
Okay.
I tell you, I joke that I spend a lot of time leading horses to water,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes they drink, sometimes they don't. I'm thinking, if you can just reflect, great. If you can write it down, even better. But writing it down helps you be able to kind of look back for trends and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. Have you ever looked into anything like, some people have kind of create like a little scoring system for themselves. What do you think about doing something like that?
Oh, I like the sound of that. I don't know that much about those.
I've seen people do like they'll say what are the they'll come up with 4 or 5 things that are super important to them.
Yeah.
And I mean people get very elaborate with this stuff. I would guess that most of the people that have really elaborate systems tend to burn out because you can only handle maintaining the systems for so long. So the simpler you make them, the more likely you are to actually keep doing them.
Well said. Well said. Yeah.
So they'll do, kind of like, they'll just do a circle, like basically half circle if they did a pretty good job or a full circle if they feel like they, did well with that thing for the day or something
You're
like that.
reminding me, one of the exercises we do with the It, the We, and the I is have people draw 3 roughly equal circles, right, for the It, the We, and the I, label them. And then if the outside of the circle represents perfection for the It, like all my projects are going perfectly well, I'm hitting all my deadlines, whatever. For the We, perfection would be, my relationships are perfect, right? I'm just in sync with everybody. For my I, I know my moods. I can hold my energy all day long. So the outside circle represents perfection.
Yeah.
So you would draw an inner circle that represents reality for you today.
Like how far away you are from that.
Exactly, right? So if that's perfection and my business is not going well, I might have a very small circle.
Yeah.
For me today, business is going pretty well, so a fairly large circle, but inside of that other circle. You do that for the It, the We, and the I, and it helps you. I have one person who says every day at work, he draws those 3 circles, and whatever one is smallest, that's what he kind of leans into that day. Right?
Yeah,
So,
I think that's actually kind of an interesting thing to do. Is possibly like a daily habit. Is just making those circles every day, and
it's so simple.
Yeah, and just as a really easy visual check-in.
Yeah.
Because for me, like writing, I have on and again, off again had different journaling habits and stuff over the years, but when I do it, it always feels good. And sometimes when my mind is, for me, it's very cathartic and very clarifying to write. To do, especially like stream of conscious stuff when I'm trying to like work through something and the mind feels cluttered. So I think that can be a really useful exercise.
Yeah, so it's not just a reflection, but a way of kind of uncluttering your mind. And I used to have a mentor who would say, you never really know what you think until you talk about it or you write it down. It's a powerful exercise.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that feedback from a lot of people too, that just like, I've heard more extreme examples where like, people will sit down and try and get, even about just like random things in their life or like how they feel about different issues and stuff like that. Lots of times we don't take a lot of time to actually think through systemically how we feel about different things or what our opinions are on things. And so then it makes it hard to take a stance on different topics because you don't feel like you've really put in the work to think through things. And so writing it down can once again be quite clarifying.
Yeah. You're reminding me, this is another model that I got from Chris Holmberg many years ago, was when you're thinking about yourself, you think PIE, the physical, intellectual, and emotional states. How am I doing physically, intellectually, emotionally? So just another very simple model that you can use for structuring your writing or your journal entry or your thinking. So,
yeah, no, that's really really good. I will also make a recommendation too. There's a guy named, I don't know if you ever heard of Michael Hyatt.
oh, yes.
He's done a lot of great like kind of personal productivity content and stuff. He has a since we're talking a little bit about it, a planner called a full focus planner that has a lot of as a part of it. There's like goal setting, some daily stuff. It's all about handwriting stuff because there's a lot of evidence that, like we've been talking about, that handwriting is very effective. Even though we live in the digital world with thousands of digital task managers.
For me, unreadable, but effective.
But
Sorry, I interrupted you.
no, you're fine. As long as you get there, right? It's but and what's nice about this planner is that you have one planner for every quarter, but as a part of every day, there is kind of a daily review process built into the planner, and then at the end of every week, a weekly review process built into the planner, and it's just really good. So the whole idea is, in the beginning of the planner, you set annual and then quarterly goals, and then you're creating what you think is an ideal week, and then every day you're kind of. And every week you're reflecting back on those things and doing a regular check-in. Yeah. Because lots of times we try and set annual goals, but then we don't break it down any smaller than that. And so when you try and set an annual goal, no one does it. I don't think anyone really makes annual goals. Right? So if you shorten the time span, it really helps.
Yeah, or you break it apart. You reminded me of one of my first jobs out of graduate school. I taught time management for a little company. They were bought by Franklin. Nobody knows them, but they were bought by Franklin Covey.
Which older folks know Franklin Covey.
Yeah.
I don't.
But I'm surprised at how many people, especially some of my coachees, I do a fair amount of coaching, they don't really have rules of thumb or ways to plan. And so it's, I'll often ask to look at people's calendars and, walk me through. And I'm surprised when I get, deer in the headlights or people don't really know about planning. So it's a really important skill that if you don't know, I'm thinking there are plenty of resources, or let me know.
Yeah. Talk to you about it.
You were reminding me of another mentor. I stand on the shoulders of so many people.
Everyone does. No one's an original.
You plan a day once a day, a week once a week, a month once a month, or a quarter, and a year once a year. So, every day I've got a little chunk of time planned for planning the next day. Every week, it's usually on Sunday nights, I'm sitting down planning the next week. Every quarter, I'm kind of looking at the quarter ahead. And once a year, I take 1 or 2 days to just dig in and look back at the year. Somebody said, if you want to know what you value, you look at your checkbook and your calendar. Nobody uses checkbooks these days, but QuickBooks or Quicken or whatever you're using, right?
Yeah.
And your calendar. But I use that time to kind of look back and see, well, what did I do and where did I go and how did I, meet the goals I had set, and then set my plan for the next year.
Yeah, I think that's really useful, and that kind of ties in with that planner that I was talking about. It has a similar system, and I think that's really helpful. I don't think that it's really easy for life to just pass you by. Yeah. And just be to get a little more philosophical with it, but just to be kind of you're just in the hamster wheel and you're just going, and you're never reflecting on whether or not you're spending time on the right things.
Yes.
So
it's fun. It seems like it speeds up the older you get.
Yeah, I've heard the reason for that is because when you're 10, 1 year is a tenth of your life, right?
Oh, of course.
And that fraction gets smaller and smaller. So relative to your total lifespan, blocks of time get smaller and smaller.
Very good.
Which always made sense to me. So I want to talk a little bit about just what you think makes you successful. I think that's...
I have no idea.
I think we were touching on some of the things, right? Some of these practices.
Yeah.
And one thing I've been talking to people about is, do you consider yourself a morning person or a night person?
That's a good question, because left to my own devices, I would never sleep. I would just stay up all night, and do things. But I love being up really early, before the sun comes up, before everybody else is up. It's so quiet. I often take walks, before the sun comes up, that kind of thing. So it's hard to answer. So I think because I'm working, my schedule kind of pushes me to lean more into the morning hours, but quite literally, if I didn't have to sleep, I wouldn't. I don't know. I feel like I leave it. I hope we all do, but I notice I tend to lead a rich, full life, and I just want more of it.
Yeah. If you had, when do you think you get your, standard business schedule aside, when do you think you'd get your best deep work done? And do you think it's more in the evening? Would it be more in the evening or more in the morning?
Probably in the morning, after a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And sometimes it seems like this is I can't remember. I have an example related to this. Did you and I talk about the fact that once worked as a professional juggler.
I've heard this. I'd
Yes.
love for you to elaborate on that.
So there's the phenomenon that I'm trying to get to is this idea that you're working on a problem one day, you go to sleep, and the next morning you have answers and you don't know where they came from. And one of the things I noticed when I was juggling, so I went to school in New Orleans, and one of the things there I picked up, the jugglers who worked the French Quarter would practice in Audubon Park right across the street from where I was at school at Loyola.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I might have talked about this idea that sometimes you might, or at least once in your life, I hope people have this, where you see people doing something and some part of you goes, I want to do that. And so this would happen for me when I saw these two people passing clubs, two people.
Mm-hmm. The
Something exactly, but
yeah.
passing, and they were doing it so well. It's like, oh, I want to do that. And so it turns out that they practiced with, jugglers who worked the French Quarter in Audubon Park, and I would go every Sunday afternoon and go practice with these guys, and I got good. I got really good. And not that people were paying me and stuff like that. But I remember that I'd be working on a really hard trick, like, I don't know, juggling 4 clubs. That's ridiculously hard. And I would sleep on it, or I'd go away from it for a few days, and then when I came back, it's almost like my body had been working on it. And when I tried the new pattern, I would get it. It would fall apart, but the first time I tried it, I would get it for a few repetitions. And I was like, well, where did that come from?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway. But I think that applies to other things. And I find in the morning it's often, maybe it's from good night's sleep and some setting up the problem ahead of time, but I often get ideas and insights and answers that I didn't have the day before. So.
That's helpful. I'm definitely a morning person, 100%. Like if 6 to 10 would be, if it's not always feasible, but would be like the sweet spot for me in terms of being like productive and getting deep work done. But I don't, it's interesting that you talk about, people talk about that all the time, like going to sleep or having the shower thoughts or things. I don't personally have that experience as much, where it just like something pops into my head. I think where I have breakthroughs, once again, to keep talking about this, it's writing stuff down. Like
nice.
Stream of consciousness, just like putting things on paper is where I feel like my best kind of like thoughts come from. So it's always interesting how people's brains work.
We're all different. But then we're back to the bug Russ, the bug Jonathan. It's just being aware, where do I get my ideas? And you notice that you tend, that's so valuable to notice that you get them.
That's a great point.
From writing, right? So,
Yeah, really taking time to understand yourself and what works, and creating a situation that you're going to be productive in, right? Yeah. I think that's super helpful.
Yeah.
So are there, speaking of, starting your day, is there anything that, do you have any particular, and we've talked a little bit about this perhaps, but any kind of particular daily habits, whether the beginning or the end or middle of your day that you're doing that feel like help make you successful?
Well, I try to be faithful to this, but I don't every day. But I try and meditate for a little while, get a little bit of exercise. I often take a walk in the morning. I mentioned that. I have a poem that I say every morning.
Interesting.
Yeah. If you'd like, I'd be happy to.
I'd love to hear it. I also should have told you to bring something to juggle.
Oh, maybe next time. I'm hoping this will be the first of several.
I'm sure it will be. Yeah.
But yeah, so almost every day I start my day with this poem. It comes from a guy named John O'Donohue. He's an Irish poet, author. He was a priest, philosopher, and it goes like this. I bless the night that nourished my heart to set the ghosts of longing free into the flow and figure of dream that went to harvest from the dark bread for the hunger no one sees. All that is eternal in me welcomes the wonder of this day, the field of brightness it creates, offering time for each thing to arise and illuminate. I place on the altar of dawn, I love this, the quiet loyalty of breath. I smile with this, the tent of thought where I shelter, which is just something I think too much. The tent of thought where I shelter, waves of desire I am sure to, and all beauty drawn to the eye. May my mind come alive today to the invisible geography of that invites me to new frontiers, to break the dead shell of yesterdays, and to risk being disturbed and changed. This is my favorite part. May I have the courage today to live the life that I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but do at last what I came here for, and waste my heart on fear no more.
It's very beautiful.
Isn't that great?
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was much more. I'm just impressed that you had the whole thing memorized.
Yeah,
That was much more than I was thinking, like a little limerick or something.
Yeah, yeah. So I love that. It's a, I don't know, what is that? 2 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that. So, but it's a kind of a morning meditation that I enjoy. And I love that part about let my, don't waste my heart on fear.
What is it about that specific poem that speaks to you?
Oh, well, I think it does several things. One is I'm not a very religious person, and it helps me kind of tap back into some of my more religious days, I suppose. But the habit of having something that's like a touchstone every day, and a reminder that, our days are limited. And, as a person, you wouldn't know this without asking, but I'm terrified of so many things. And this is just kind of a reminder, I kind of think I'm here for a purpose, and those things that I'm scared of, it's okay to lean into them, things like that. So those are the big things.
Yeah. That's great. I think that comes back to that whole reflection activity, reflecting on what basically you're saying. The way I'm reading it is that like saying that poem every day is a way of saying like, these are my priorities today. Like, these are the things I want to make sure I focus on and don't lose sight of that, as a kind of a guidepost for how I approach my day.
It's funny. I have a blog post that I forget the title. It's something like, every now and then a leader needs a good poet.
That's catchy. I like that.
And I think, I don't tend to talk about poets or poetry or poems that often, but poets are often people who have put into words those things that we struggle with, right? And so it feels like a shortcut to kind of lean into them for helping us think about things we don't ordinarily think about.
Yeah, it's like putting emotion to words or something like that.
Yeah.
That's really
emotions
that's really
that my mother passed away this summer, and I found poetry really helpful for all those crazy emotions you experience when you're dealing with death of a significant person.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So do you find yourself reading poetry often?
A lot, actually, more than I would have imagined if you'd asked me this, when I was 12 or something. But yeah.
Who are your? Obviously we heard one.
John O'Donohue. My favorite poets.
Yeah. So what's some of your preferred poets?
Yeah. There's a woman. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce her name correctly. Naomi Shahid Nye, something like that. She has a poem called Kindness. That I love a lot. Mary Oliver, Billy Collins.
I know Billy Collins.
Yeah.
Did like a report on him in high school or something.
Fantastic. Very good. Yeah. There's so many. So, but, yeah.
Well, we'll have to. I do record people's book recommendations. You'll have to give some poetry book recommendations to me to add into the description. If you've got anything that people, a couple of those that people might enjoy.
You mean now or later?
No, later. Unless you know some off the top of your head.
Well, I'm thinking as long as John O'Donohue is on our minds, he's got a book. It's kind of a book of blessings, but it's called something like "Bless the Space Between Us." That poem that I read comes out of. So, but that's the book I took back with me to Atlanta when we buried my mom.
Wow.
And found all sorts of good uses for it.
So that's a good one then. That speaks a lot to the quality of that. So I want to talk. Let's talk a little bit about get back to your business a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to hear about like what's one of the best things about running your business and the work that you're doing.
You probably hear this from people all the time. The best part is the work.
Well, that's great. Not everyone feels that way.
Yeah, no. I hope that I can spend the rest of my career helping people learn to be better leaders and build better teams and that kind of thing. But my favorite part of my work is when I'm working with ideally one other person or perhaps a team, and I'm helping them as an individual or a group. It's usually like 2 or 3 people. Figure out what is it that I want. Maybe for the we and the I, right? For the project, the relationships. My interest in having a trusting relationship with you or whatever it is, right? And for me personally, but understand those and then have the courage and the words to articulate that, right? So I love that, and so much magic comes from that. Sometimes it's people moving deeper into organizations. Sometimes it's them leaving organizations. Sometimes it's helping projects get better, or deciding this is a crazy idea. We need to cancel this and move on to something else. Right? But that kind of work I just love. So
that's awesome. I think I think for me it's always I just love making things better. I was having a one-on-one meeting with someone today, and it's almost a compulsion to see something that could be better and like to do something about it. Like I just want so then I'm trying to make a business about that, right? Is helping people run their businesses better, because there's so many opportunities that most people aren't taking advantage of.
So you're saying you can see the problem and you want to fix it for them, that kind of thing?
I want to help them fix it. I think it's interesting when you talk about like systems thinking. I think the way I a lot of my business acumen and my experience comes from working with my father, right?
Oh, yes.
And in our family, in our farm. And I think his approach is very always approaching things like very logically, very rationally, like step by step. And I think I just picked that up from working with him for so long and approaching problems and stuff, highly rational. And I think that's just like wired now, maybe also growing up that way too, probably like hardwired deep in me that it's if you see someone doing something and it doesn't, in fact, it's to the point where like I've had to learn not to say things because it gets obnoxious actually, but not everyone wants unsolicited advice all the time. But just like to see something that doesn't look right and to not make it better is hard for me.
It sounds like it's hardwired. You grew up with a very talented guy doing that. And
he has other as we all, he has other flaws, but in that particular way he was very good, skilled at like seeing a problem and finding creative ways to address it, and not being content with a problem continuing to exist as well. So I think that's an easy trap to fall into.
That's great.
Now, the flip side of that is, what's one of the things that you don't like about what you do?
Oh, that's easy. All the administrative stuff. The bookkeeping, writing proposals, and trying to wrangle schedules and stuff like that.
As someone I know says, administrivia is all the kind of that stuff. I don't think any. Well, maybe some people like that because there are executive assistants and things like that. People that like those kinds of things.
Some people thrive on that.
So I can't say that. But I'm with you. That's not my preferred thing.
I tried to hire that out as I can, and the people I hired, they're brilliant at it. And I'm like, thank you. So,
Well, there's a really interesting framework that is useful for thinking about those things. This is something that I really like from Michael Hyatt, actually. Is called the Freedom Compass. And I'm not going to recall this probably perfectly, but basically there's actually, you know what? Let me look it up to make sure I get this right. But the idea of focusing on the things that you love and you're good at, as opposed to because it's really easy to have things that you love that you're not good at, right?
You're echoing what I know as the Ikigai model or a Venn diagram that for 4 pieces that when you're thinking about your career, for example, you would one of them is what you love. One of the circles is what you can get paid for. One of them is what the world needs, and I'm blanking on the 4th one. But the overlap of those.
Interesting.
Let's see. What am I missing? What you love, what you can get paid for, what you're good at, and what the world needs. It's those 4. Yeah. Does that sound familiar? Or maybe different.
I'm not. It's a similar idea, but it's a different application, slightly different application. Because that sounds like it's more of like a career or starting a business.
Thinking about what you're going to do.
Yeah, this is more of like understanding like what you should be spending your time on. And there's basically, so there's kind of 4 quadrants. One is proficient and not proficient, and then passionate and not passionate.
Okay.
And the idea is that you want to try and spend as much of your time doing things that you're proficient and passionate about.
Okay.
So that you're both enjoying the work and you're efficient with that time.
Okay.
And then that's called like what he calls the desire zone.
Okay.
The distraction zone is things you're passionate about but not proficient at. So those are things that like you like doing, but takes you 2 or 3 times as long as someone else, and just end up being a waste of time, even though you really like doing it.
That's like me with Photoshop.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. I would say that's even me, like as someone that's a bit of like a tech nerd. I can get really in the weeds with some IT stuff, and it's actually way more cost effective for me to hire it out and for me to focus on the business. Even though I could get there eventually, what takes me 6 hours may take them an hour.
I like it.
And then there's the disinterest zone, which is for you probably, well, not, there's the disinterest zone and the drudgery zone. So disinterest is things that you're proficient at, but you're not passionate about. So like you're good at doing it, but you don't really want to be doing it.
Right.
And then the worst is drudgery, where you're not proficient and you're not passionate about it, and that's just a slog.
Got it.
So
that sounds like spreadsheets for me.
Yeah,
I'm really good at them, but I would prefer not to.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
So the idea is that you basically get rid of, delegate, or automate anything in the distraction, disinterest, or drudgery zone, so that you're spending as much time as possible in your desire zone.
Got it.
You know, so I find that to be a pretty useful framework for thinking about things.
I like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it could be useful for the coaching.
Yes.
So we talked about let me pull this back up here. So what do you think, what makes you different compared to other kinds of leadership and development coaches? Like, what do you kind of think is...
Apart from the fact that I'm a really good juggler.
Yeah. Aside from juggling skills.
Yeah. Well, there are 4 things that I tend to think about. One of them is that I tend to focus on problem solving, right? Like lots of coaches will, I'm going to help you learn how to communicate better. Everything I do is in the service of helping you be a better problem solver. Right? People leave my workshops and say, oh yeah, Russ, help me learn to communicate better. And it's in the service of solving problems, right? So that's one of them. I mentioned the fact that all my models / Chris Holmberg's models are simple but not easy, right? So they're simple to remember but not necessarily easy to use. One of the other things is I tend to, and this is again an influence from Chris Holmberg, I tend to think of teams and help others think of teams as biological systems rather than mechanical systems.
Okay.
And you'll hear this, people, oh yeah, I want my team to run like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
Like, no. You can't, I can't remember if I joked with you about this. It's like when you wake up in the morning to start your car, it doesn't start, right? So you go and diagnose what's going on, and you discover that there's a spark plug and a bad mood. That's what a human system is like, right?
Right.
They're chaotic, they're unpredictable, right? And then so what I teach is it helps with that. And then the 4th thing is middle path, that's the name of the workshop that I teach and stuff I get from Chris. And that's all about helping leaders, recognize extremes, avoid those, and move to what we call the center or the middle path. I'm happy to elaborate on that now or another time. So.
Yeah.
But those 4 things I think separate me from others.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think once again coming back to it, when the frameworks that you're trying to use or systems you're trying to use are too complicated, then you don't do them.
Yeah.
Especially when the things you're dealing with, like leadership and stuff like that, and problem solving, are difficult on their own to figure out.
Yeah.
And so when you're trying to apply a complicated framework on it against it, I can only imagine that the success rate isn't great.
Yeah. So I love, and this is something, an influence of Chris's, is that give me a simple model, something I can remember almost instantaneously, and I'm far more likely to use that than the 17. There's one out there, a 17-step model to better communication. I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's too much.
Anyway, yeah.
So we are getting close to the end of our time, and I think I want to get into the bonus questions because those are always kind of a fun baseline to hear different people's answers to things. The first one is, to come back to books.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what are some of the books that you've either gifted or recommended to people the most?
Business or personal? Or does it matter?
Whichever. This is this is
So
your choice.
one of my favorites these days is a book called Humankind. Bregman, I think, Rutger Bregman. I wanna
Okay.
say. And Humankind, it's a wonderful book about how to remember. If we ask people, do you think people are basically good or basically evil? And often we get back, oh, well, you remember Lord of the Flies, right? The kids on an island, they end up, attacking each other. Well, this book is about how human beings are basically good to each other. And he goes and gets some research. There's a
Interesting.
real life story about kids that were stranded on an island. They weren't found for like maybe a year and a half. And they had done really well. They had, figured out a way.
So real life Lord of the Flies.
Exactly. Have a justice systems, and they built like a gymnasium, well, outside, but took really good care of each other. The exact opposite of the Lord of the Flies. It's called Humankind by, I think it's Rutger Bregman.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's one. There's another one on the personal side that I've been. When I was doing my counseling studies, I came across this idea that human beings, especially men, don't deal with grief very well.
I believe that.
Yeah. There's a book called How to Survive the Loss of a Love that I have probably given away 100 copies of that. And what I love about it is it addresses the grief issue, right? But it's written by a medical doctor, a psychologist, and a poet, right? And so the medical doctor kind of gives you, biologically what to expect. The psychologist gives you kind of intellectually or emotionally what to expect. And the poet offers a poem for whatever the topic is.
Huh. That sounds very
And
interesting.
An example would be when you experience some sort of loss, you're going to feel tired, right? It's like, your body has to recover from this.
Right.
So the medical doctor gives you what to expect. The poet says there will be no poem today because the poet is taking a nap. But yeah, so that's easily the book I've given more than any other.
That's great. No, that's a good recommendation. Thank you on both fronts. So the other thing is that I ask a lot of people is, what would you put on a billboard? Over a busy freeway, you want to, like, a piece of advice that you'd want everyone to get.
Got it. My first thought on that is there's something like there are 2 secrets of success. And the first is never reveal everything you know. I just love that.
I'm chewing on that one for.
There are 2 secrets to success.
Yeah,
One,
so you've already revealed everything you know.
well, no, you're not going to get.
Oh, you don't get the second one. I got yeah.
So, but the real one was, I was thinking about this on the way over here, that one of my favorite authors is Jean Le Carré, the spy novelist, and he has this quote, something like, a desk is a terrible place from which to view the world. Something like that, which suggests to me that you got to get up, you got to be out, meeting people, doing the work, that kind of thing.
I
Something
love
along
that.
those
That's
lines.
great. That's great. I think that it comes back around to, it's very easy to get stuck in the hamster wheel and not just get out. That to me is actually a quote worth
Dangerous.
having
That's
on your
his
wall.
word. A desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world. Something like that.
Yeah, that's a really good thing
Yeah.
because we end up working so much, and it's just easy to lose all that, just lose so much of your life in front of a desk.
What great questions. This has been so much fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure,
It has been wonderful having you on. It was great chatting with you. A lot of interesting insights.
Likewise.
We'll definitely have you back on the podcast
Yes,
at some point
let's
in the
do it.
future.
Let's do it.
So thank you so much for being on. Do you want to, anything you'd like to plug here?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. My new line of soaps. No, my Leadership in the Middle Path program. It's a workshop that helps individuals and teams be better collaborative problem solvers. And I've got 2 of those coming up, a virtual one in January and another one in Petaluma in April. And if you just Google Leadership in the Middle Path and Russ Powell, you'll find it. So.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
What's your website? Just
RussPowell.com.
okay,
So,
perfect.
RussPowell.com.
RussPowell?
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on. This is the On the Flywheel podcast. You can find me at podcast at ontheflywheel.com. Please rate it, like it, subscribe. And then you can find Flywheel Consulting at flywheelconsulting.co. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening.